it ended up being like for the like AC we were getting, it didn't work. So you have to pivot and then you find what works for you and you do a lot of trial and error and you tell people that you're doing trial and error, um, because then they're flexible. And also, that's the best way to get people to adopt new processes is just say, we're trying it. If you hate it, tell me and we can change.
Welcome, Mary Kate. So nice to have you on How They Test. Really appreciate you making time. Why don't we start today just by chatting a little bit more about you and your background? How long have you been working in QA? Where are you working in? Or what company are you working for now? And what does a day in the life look like for you these days?
Yeah. So I have been in QA for going going on 8 years now. I have a non-traditional path to it, which I think is true of a lot of people in QA. I actually have an English degree, so no technical training in that regard. Um, a lot of on-the-job learning and training from there. I started working in software startups in CS, which I think is a really helpful background for QA, especially because it really teaches you to like have the customer in the forefront of your mind. Then I transitioned into QA. I worked at Wayfair in Boston. And then I transitioned to my current company, which is Breezeway, where I am head of quality, which is a really cool title that comes with a lot of responsibility. But to be clear, it's a 2-person team, so not running like a 50-person department.
What is a day in a life for the head of quality and a 2-person QA team at a small software startup? Like, do you have any kind of regularity to that, or is it just whatever comes, comes?
A little of both. So I've had to set the regularity myself. I was the first quality person they hired. They hadn't like had quality as a formal role before. Obviously, people use quality practices even without knowing it. But me coming in was to sort of formalize it. So I do a lot of like start the day. I usually do like my normal monitoring. So I'll check all my emails. We have several different engineering teams. I do dedicated testing for one of them, in addition to like larger department work. But I have monitoring set up, so I'll check my emails. I'll check a few different like post-release bug dashboards I have set up in Jira to see like has anything really high severity or priority come in from CS that I should be aware of. I make myself a watcher on a lot of tickets. If I see something I feel like I know about, we have one person who sort of heads the communication of triaging bugs from CS to the engineering teams. So she and I will Slack. I'll say, like, do you think this is this? Does anything need to be escalated? I could talk to the teams about it. I also, my like project work tends to be split between test planning, actual test execution, RCA. I try to do project reports after projects are done, to identify themes. Um, in the course of the 2.5 years I've been here, we've developed a lot of like custom processes. So we have RCA diagnosis processes, root cause analysis. That's pretty standard, but I've also added a lot of like themes that we track, and we track bug themes, either similar types of issues or issues in similar features. We can easily pull all those and use them for reference later. And I do sort of like department wide work as well. I have a lot of one-on-ones so I can keep up with everybody with the least amount of effort, because obviously there's a lot of things to juggle. So I meet with CS, I meet with product, I meet with engineering, just to like make sure that the communication and work between everybody is working. Like, if bugs are filed by CS, do we need to update the way those are answered? Is there information that is missing that we could use to save time? How do we prevent things going back and forth? Stuff like that. So it's never boring.
Never sounds like a dull moment there at all.
Yeah. Yes.
I love that. Just to help get a little bit more context too, can you tell us a little bit about the kind of applications or systems that you're testing at Breezeway? Like, what kind of product y'all are making?
So Breezeway is a platform. It's a B2B for property managers usually. So it's in the like vacation rental industry. It is most used as an operations platform. So if someone owns like 10 short-term rental units, they can organize all of the work involved with that in Breezeway, from like supplies that cleaners might need to use to reservations. We have integrations that come in from like Airbnb and similar platforms. We have a messaging platform as well, that my colleague, the other person on the two-person team, tends to. I usually run the operations testing. She usually runs the messaging and like guest interface testing. But yeah, we're always adding new things as well. So it's very it's satisfying because the feedback we get from clients is that it's actually incredibly valuable to their day-to-day work. So it is nice to do something that like fills a very specific niche.
It also sounds like that kind of communication, both like ear to the ground, like being really tight with customers and also really tight with your team, is an integral part of what it means to do QA at the company. Can you talk a little bit more about like what it takes to make that culture something that like everybody's on board with, or like how you've developed a culture around that kind of communication and make it successful? Because there's a lot of teams that we've talked to who would love to be in the position that you are, and it takes a lot of work to do that. I'm just curious if there's anything that you found to be helpful to actually kind of get that going.
Yeah, it is, for like inner team stuff. I think building relationships with people is really important. Breezer is also a fully remote company. So you can imagine that adds another level of challenge. I feel very lucky that my start of my career was not fully remote, because I think it would have been much more difficult to like start in tech without having already figured out how to have those relationships. So I try to make everything visible and give clear deadlines. So like if I have a meeting with someone, I take notes on everything, and I follow up and I say, okay, how about by this date we, resync, or how about would this work for you? That way we are keeping the line of communication open, but also giving something concrete. Otherwise, I think this is true for a lot of people. I just will simply never do something if I don't have a deadline. So you got to set the deadlines. You have to, I think, establish trust in relationship and make people want to talk to you. Like if I do something wrong, I'll be the first to say, yeah, that was my fault, because that's what I want people to also say to me, if they do something wrong. And I always try to keep any like more difficult conversations about our process and not about the people using it, um, because that makes the conversations a lot more pleasant. I think also, especially in a remote environment, having like a channel or two that's a little bit more fun or social. Like in our stand-ups, I give an animal fact every day, which is, you think a silly thing, but then people reach out and they're like, I love this, or I want other people to like join in on this. And then you get those conversations going.
It's so funny. I think one of the things that I hear most these days about like where QA adds value in the development process is like bringing the humanity back in it. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times when we're talking about that, it's more on the technical side. It's bringing the perspective of the customer. Who's actually using this? Is this actually accomplishing the goal that we set out to accomplish, and doing so in a way that a human is going to get the value from it? But I love that you're doing that just in the process that your team has. Like you're bringing the humanity back to how you build the software itself too, which is so fun. And I think right in the spirit of QA from everybody that I've talked to.
Yeah, I think the thing that's critical about a QA mindset is A, like having curiosity, and B, being able to see the whole picture as well as just the details. Like both are very important, obviously. But yeah, like if you have information that's coming in from your customer support team and nobody has a dedicated position where they're like running triage on that, then it just gets dropped. It's not anybody's fault. That's just how it is. So like having a view of the whole process and seeing, okay, there's a gap here. Why don't we chat about it? Usually everybody's pretty on board with, oh, this was something I was thinking too. They just didn't have the avenue to say it. And yet taking that sort of like step back, I think, is really beneficial.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious how you juggle being like a 1 or 2 person team, having maintained that perspective. You're playing a lot of role in terms of that glue connecting teams together, both from customers and internal development teams. Um, when do you have time for testing?
So the amount of what I'm doing will depend. Like, I think anybody who's ever worked QA will say, like, everything's always ready at once, and then you'll have a lull where nothing's ready. So it's basically you have to be really flexible. So I spent all of December doing nothing but testing, and now it's January, and I'm doing nothing but documentation because nothing's ready to test. You have to have that flexibility, and you have to be very clear with your bandwidth. I think because I'm not an overpromiser. I'm not. I'm very frank. I would say if I don't think something will work, I'll say it won't work politely and constructively. But I will never give an estimation I don't think is correct. We've definitely had instances where I had to stop one project and join another because it was higher priority. And I think as long as making sure everybody is on board with that and everybody's like in writing on board with that, it's all you can do. So, and you just go with the flow.
Have you developed anything in the way around test methodology or process that you found enables you to have that flexibility?
Yes. So starting, especially when I first started with this company, we had to sort of build that from scratch. I came from Wayfair to a much smaller company, so I came from like all these established processes I didn't have much control over to suddenly I can set them all up myself. So I had to learn pretty quickly. Like the most important thing is that it's appropriate for the moment that you're in, not that it's what you think it should be. So like I have set up Notion boards where I have cards for each project I'm working on, and then I can like visually show people, here's everything in the queue. Where do we move it? Um, I yeah, it's you have to figure out. We actually a lot of times we will document test cases outside of Testmo just to get it done really quickly, and then we move it into Testmo. We use the sessions a lot. When I first started, I really wanted to use like the test suites a bit more. It ended up being like for the like AC we were getting, it didn't work. So you have to pivot and then you find what works for you and you do a lot of trial and error and you tell people that you're doing trial and error um, because then they're flexible. And also, that's the best way to get people to adopt new processes is just say, we're trying it. If you hate it, tell me and we can change.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is amazing how much just how you communicate about something can totally change the character of like of what you like, how the team receives it and what you can do together around it.
Yeah, maybe the English degree has been helpful.
There it is, coming back to support you even with the more technical stuff now. And then just from a technical perspective, is there anything that's particularly tricky or challenging about the systems that y'all are testing that you found some kind of helpful tips for, or is it kind of the more straightforward and it's really just about managing the test planning? Like, is there anything tricky from a technical perspective that you've had to work around, or is it more just about time and resourcing?
I would say it's both. So we have some things we have a staging test environment. We can't test everything there. Like I said, we have a lot of integrations. You can't really get like Airbnb staging data. So you have to adjust. So like product will often take over stuff like that because they have relationships with the clients and they can say like, hey, we would like to talk with you specifically about this integration. And you just have to like allow that to happen. We have had definitely some situations where like testing was blocked for some reason. We do very frequent refreshes to keep our data fresh and our environment healthy, which actually works really well. We have like a very surprisingly healthy staging environment. But I've like worked with engineers and we've set up certain things that don't get refreshed so that we're not resetting up an entire suite of test data every week. So yeah, you basically just have to like monitor, figure out where the problems are, and then figure out what's the easiest possible solution to this. Sometimes you need a bigger, more holistic solution, but a lot of the times it's just like, it doesn't need to be perfect. What just gets this done now?
That's awesome. It sounds like all of that time they were putting into building relationships is coming to fruition when you've got folks that you can collaborate pretty closely with on developing these systems that work, making sure that they're set up for you, and like being able to partner and collaborate on even just on the like, test pipeline itself.
Yeah.
That's
And
huge.
A lot of people like doing that work because it's something different and they'll be like, oh, I thought of this other thing. Do you need this too? So just like keeping that door open. It's not pulling teeth. Like a lot of people really enjoy doing those things.
That's awesome. I'm curious if you think back on the last year. I mean, it sounds like things are pretty dynamic. You're a small startup, you're
Mm-hmm.
actively pushing out new product to customers, you're getting quick feedback cycles and iterating. I'm curious if there's any like single challenges that stick out as like, oh, this was a major hurdle that we had to overcome, and here's how we overcame it.
I don't think there was any major hurdles like that, like any singular things. There's definitely been a lot of change. Um, so we're a little bit less than a year into going from a one-person team to a two-person team. And I think that was probably the most beneficial thing that's happened for a while, not just because of obviously bandwidth, but having another person to riff with who's also like in this specific field. Like she found a lot of redundancies in my processes that I had gone blind to. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is completely true. Let's just change this. And it's been I think the busyness has probably been the biggest hurdle. And all the flexibility we talked about is how you get around that. But the best change from all of that has definitely been just like having another perspective on the team.
Yeah. I mean, it's why diversity in the team is so important, right? Like being able to
Mm-hmm.
have different perspectives, whether it's different past life experience, different work experience, even just having a second set of eyes on the same problem at that time, that just makes such a difference to be able to like find a solution and find it more quickly.
Yeah. And definitely and like I manage that other person. So like from a management perspective, in like our current startup environment, I like we have like baseline requirements and then I give a lot of freedom to like play around with it, see what works for you. And like we've gotten some really great updates from that. So yeah,
That's
just
awesome.
yeah. Not being too set in your ways, I think is a really important thing.
Good lessons for work, good lessons for life.
Yes.
Um, maybe that brings us maybe to just our last question, and then I'll let you go. Any particular tips or advice outside of what you've shared so far? Maybe there's a question I didn't ask that you've been waiting for me to, or something like that, or something just comes to mind. But anything that you would want to share with peers, similar roles at a similar company, if you were in your like if you were speaking to yourself a year or two ago, anything that you wish you could have told your past self then that would have made things a little bit easier?
I think it depends a lot on like what would work for like an individual's work style. So like for me, I put absolutely everything in writing and that's really valuable because like the documentation is invaluable. If I need like an engineer to look at something, I'll be like, I already wrote an article about it. Here you go. Um, but also just like keeping track of everything and being able to like pull that information and data, I find is really persuasive. Um, I but not everybody needs to do that. It does take some time. So if somebody is somebody who can get that information without doing all of that extra work, then I wouldn't say you have to change. But yeah, I think just don't lose sight of being curious and playing around with things and keeping the customer at the forefront. I know when I first started QA, I was very unsure and just assumed I think I didn't know enough about certain things. So I wouldn't ask some questions that like today I would not hesitate to ask. And a lot of times it's just you're coming in from a different perspective and nobody thought about it. So I think definitely continuing to like build that confidence is maybe not myself last year, but my early QA self, I would absolutely say just like you don't need to just assume that this is something someone has thought of. They might not have thought of it, and you need to bring that to the table.
And in fact, the questions that may feel or seem simplest sometimes are the most influential or profound. Like you're talking about earlier, it's so easy to develop those little blind spots, especially for folks who are deep in the weeds on technical stuff. At the end of the day, the user is usually not going to be caring about how you're refactoring that particular snippet of code. They're going to care about like, how does this actually help me do my job better or
Yeah.
accomplish this thing that I need, get the cleaning supplies that I need to make sure that this rental is ready for the next tenant. So I love that. I love that perspective. Don't be afraid to ask the simple questions.
Yeah. And keep value in mind. Like obviously that is not just a QA's job. That's everyone's job. But like always be asking like, is this what people actually want? What's the effort this is going to take versus how much people are actually going to use it? I submit a lot of tickets that aren't bugs, that are just suggestions, because I'll think like, I don't think this is how people would actually use this. Let me just submit this and we can talk about it. Like, don't be afraid to bring up things that aren't necessarily failures, but that will still improve the product, because a lot of those things we end up doing. So
part of that whole quality picture. I love that. Mary Kate, this has been so good. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your very, very busy day to share some insight with us. This has been awesome. Wish you and the team all the best as you head out into year 2 with 2 folks on the team.
I know, it's very exciting, and thank you for having me.